Dr. Cheong Si Kyong, NUS Pro-Chancellor, Professor Tan Cho Chuan, NUS President, Mr. S. Dhanabalan, Chairman of NUS Business Schools Management Advisory Board, distinguished guests, fellow graduates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be with you today at what is increasingly being recognized as one of the finest universities in the world. Because of scheduling conflicts, I wasn't able to make any of my own convocations. Just to set the record straight, I did graduate. I just couldn't make the ceremony. Frankly, this is the first time in my life I put on robes, and it's quite a good feeling. But I always had this sense of loss at having missed out. Then my two children went to the American schooling system. And you know how it is with the American schooling system. They really believe in graduations. So when my daughter went from kindergarten to grade 1, there was a graduation ceremony. And then 5 years later, when we went from grade 5 to 6, there was another graduation ceremony. So 2 children and 8 ceremonies later, I have to confess that the charm of these ceremonies was beginning to be lost on me a little bit. Except last month. Last month I went to the US because my daughter was graduating from college. And I have to confess that I had a lump in the throat. Because this one is special. This is indeed a big transition. It's an important watershed, a time when you spread your wings and step out into the world as equal participants, as adults. So this graduation is a big deal. Well, the graduation is a big deal, but how about this commencement ceremony? I was reading somewhere, somebody said the reason commencement ceremonies were created is because it was kind of dangerous to let graduates like yourselves loose on an unsuspecting world without sedating you. So when you have your commencement speech being delivered by a banker, I guess you might rightly worry about the chances of staying up without snoring. But you know what? Actually, bankers have been around a pretty long time. So let me tell you the story. There were once these 3 guys, and they had a debate on whose was the oldest profession in the world. So the first chap was a genetic engineer. And he said, well, if you read the Bible, there it says in the first chapter that God created Eve from the rib of Adam. Now, to create somebody from the rib of Adam must have required a feat of genetic engineering. So obviously, genetic engineers are the oldest profession in the world. But the second guy says, oh, that's not exactly right. So if you go back and read the first paragraph of the Bible, it says there, in the beginning there was chaos. And then from the chaos, God created the universe. He created mountains and planets and suns and moons. So obviously, to do this immense feat of engineering, he must have needed a structural engineer. So it proves structural engineers are even older than genetic engineers. So the third guy, who was obviously the banker, smiled serenely and smugly and said, aha, but who do you think created the chaos? So I guess everything you thought about the oldest profession is actually not true. You know, we're probably the oldest profession going. So that probably means that it gives me the right to pass on a few words of wisdom. And I'm going to give you 4. Most commencement speakers do 3, some do 10, so 4 is my number. So I'm going to give you 4. Now it's very likely that 20 years from now, you will remember neither these 4 words of wisdom nor me. In fact, it's very likely that you won't remember these tomorrow morning as you try to shake away your hangover from tonight. But if only to line your stomachs for this evening, here goes. So my first piece of wisdom is this. The most important learning years of your life are not the ones that were just behind you, but the ones that are just coming up. I know this sounds pretty retrograde, but the reality is that most people are defined by their work. Just think of the stats. Of the 168 hours in a week, you're sleeping some 50 odd hours. Of the balance 120 hours, at least half, maybe 2/3, you will spend working. The truth is that you are what you do, and that's no cause for depression, because in that lies an opportunity. And the opportunity is this. It ain't all over. The road starts here. Over the next few years, you will find a job, perhaps several. You will probably find a partner, perhaps several. Your work will begin to consume the majority of your waking life. And in a strange but positive way, your work and career will give you the chance to craft a new persona, to define who and how you are. Most people at this ceremony exhort you to find your passion, find your love, make that into your career, thus suggesting that your career is incidental to the business of living. My own experience taught me that the reverse is actually true. I grew up in a middle-class family in New Delhi. My school years were probably very similar to many of you. I was fortunate. I got into one of the leading colleges in India and had the usual college experiences. However, and this is the crux, at the end of my college tenure, a few years younger than you, I guess, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I really had no love or passion that I could put a finger to. And I enjoyed reading, I enjoyed bird watching, but even at that age, I kind of figured that those weren't going to get me a job. Somehow, going through life with the title of bird watcher on my visiting card, just didn't seem like a tenable option. So I enrolled for an MBA just to postpone the decision around what to do with myself, and with some vague notion that it might prove a useful safety net if nothing else came along. Recruitment season arrived, and I applied to all the top multinational jobs based principally on prestige, brand, and compensation. And I was about to settle for a job with an advertising company when an offer also came along from Citibank. Now, the thing with the Citibank offer was that they sent you to the Philippines to be trained for 6 weeks. And honest to goodness, that is what shaped my decision to become a banker. I really had no knowledge of what a bank really did, and leave alone a mad passion for the industry. It was just one of those things. I think I learned more in my first 2 years of working than I have done at any other time in my life. First, I somehow developed a work ethic. I've never been a very studious guy, but suddenly I realized that in a competitive work environment, there was no substitute for discipline and hard work. Sheer brights are just not good enough to get you ahead in the company of a lot of very bright people. Conversely, I also began to see that the colleagues, the best performing colleagues, were not the ones who were toppers in school necessarily. The work environment is no respecter of your grades. It just offered a brand new opportunity to establish yourself as a winner. Second, from my first boss, I learned the power of simplicity in communication. Stay focused and to the point. The power in brevity is infinitely more than the grandeur of the Shakespearean essay. Third, I learned to deal with age differences. In my first role, I had to supervise trade union members who were many, many years older than me. And believe me, that can be daunting. It's much tougher than dealing with your mom, and what I call a character building experience. Perhaps most of all, I learned the importance of initiative. So I call it out-tray management. In the old days, in the paper world, on your table you'd have 2 trays, an in-tray and an out-tray. The in-tray stuff is where stuff comes in for you to deal with, and an out-tray is where you put it and dispose it off. Now, most people spend their life just responding to the in-tray or the inbox on email. I realized that the real trick was in being able to generate your own out-tray, setting up your own agenda. So over time, I came up with the 60-40 rule. 60% of your work will generally be reactive. Stuff will happen, and you'll have to respond to it. The true leaders are the ones who can take charge of the balance 40%. 40% of what you do should be a set of objectives you set for yourself that will help make an impact, a change for the better. The most important point, however, is this. As I changed myself in the work environment, I began to change myself as a person. I grew more disciplined, I grew crisper, I gained the confidence to lead in many other spheres in life. There's a book you might have read which says, everything I learned in life, I learned in kindergarten. Well, in my case, I'd say a lot of what I learned about life, I learned in those first 2 years on the job. For those at the bottom of the class, there's still the opportunity to get ahead. For those undecided, there's a chance to find yourself. So that's the first point. Your best learning years are just ahead of you. Make the most of them. My second piece of wisdom is this. take a few chances, some calculated risks. I'm not suggesting that you should all head off tonight to Marina Bay Sands or Resorts World Sentosa with your $100 bills in your hands at the roulette table. No, that's not the point. What I'm suggesting instead is that it often pays to get outside your comfort zone. Leave the beaten path. Do the unconventional. And do it not because you don't have a choice. Make it an active choice. I've already mentioned to you that some of the most successful people I know, at least successful in the traditional sense of money and fame and all that good stuff, they weren't the toppers at school. And many of them made it because they wound up becoming entrepreneurs. And it is obviously a lot more risky than doing a 9-to-5 job. Now, of course, several of them took this route because they could not get the plum jobs. They weren't good enough to get the plum jobs. So in a sense, their choices were more limited. But there were people who actually made a choice and said they would go for entrepreneurship. Generally speaking, very few people with great jobs are willing to make a risk trade-off. And that's particularly true in Singapore. Right? Our ability to take risk, to intermediate risk as a nation, is something we need to improve dramatically. So by and large, what happens is most people wind up going down a safe and well-trodden path. And in the end, you do well, and they do well, but rarely spectacularly well. How many of you have read Tom Peterson's book, Good is the Enemy of Great? Well, that definitely applies to careers. When you're in a good enough job, well within your comfort zone, your inertia to make change is at its highest. So in the fear of giving up on a good thing, you wind up forsaking the possibility of a great thing. Now, mind you, the reason they're called risks is because they don't always work out. The year was 1999. I was posted to Indonesia as Citi's country manager. And I think I was the youngest country manager in Citigroup at that time. The world was in the grip of the internet revolution. So the days of, early days of Yahoo and Amazon and eyeballs and page views and all the good stuff. And by then this risk-reward equation idea had gotten to me. And I decided if I let this revolution go by, I might live to rue the day. So on my 40th birthday, I upped my tent and I put in my papers and went off to set a .com. We launched the company in March of 2000 and NASDAQ began tanking 5 weeks later. So I'd caught the revolution all right, but only by the tail. And that whiplash was pretty strong. So in a few weeks, my investors pulled their funding. In 6 months, I had to shut down the company. And in a year, I was back at Citibank. Now, Citibank didn't want me to go in the first place. So they were very happy to take me back. I did say something about taking calculated risk, right? So it's a calculated risk. So that was a risk that looked like it didn't work out. I probably lost 2 or 3 years on my career track, which could seem like a significant cost. However, it did a really important thing for me. It freed me from my inhibitions. It took me off the treadmill. It created a sort of freedom in my thinking process and my decision making that I didn't have before. 2 years ago, now just short of my 50th birthday, I seem to have a thing for these milestone years, I was approached to consider leaving my division head job at Citi to switch to DBS. At Citi, I redeemed myself and was well on track to doing some really big jobs for the firm in the US if I wanted to. The decision to switch to a local Singapore bank with lots of unknowns around being part of Singapore Inc. was again not easy. But the fact is that the last 2 years have probably been the most rewarding of my career. With the chance to work on a great platform, to lead far-reaching organization changes, to really make a difference. I can truly say that I'm glad I took the risk one more time. Those of you who studied economics, and I presume many of you have as part of your MBA program, you must have come across the risk-reward equation. The premise is simple. Generally speaking, higher risk can lead to higher reward. My third piece of wisdom is this. It's really, really important to stay rooted, to keep your sense of balance. It's tough for you to believe this, but as you grow older, you will change as people. And if you become successful, then the odds are that you will change even more and rapidly begin to acquire the trappings of success. And as you get to more rarefied atmospheres, it's very easy to lose your humility and your connection to your roots. From MRTs, you move to cabs. And then you move to planes and to chauffeur-driven limos, and pretty soon it's a struggle to remember the person you used to be. But there's one foolproof way of being brought down to earth, and that's through the friendships you made right here at NUS. One of the most important things about these friends is that they know you as you really are, warts and all. And when you reconnect with these friends, it will be like time never went by. If perchance you have acquired any pomposity or any airs, you can bet that these will be prigged with alacrity, and might add with relish. So my advice to you is this: make every effort to stay in touch with the friends you've made. And believe me, it takes conscious effort to do this. As you get caught in the ebb and flow of life, the regular contact becomes the occasional call, and then soon the annual birthday greeting. Facebook helps change all this, but at the end of the day, it is still about placing a priority on these relationships and working on keeping them alive. And finally, my fourth, and perhaps the most important wisdom: be kind. Be nice to people. That's very different from being polite. Polite is easy. Nice takes a lot of work. I've learned a very useful trick to help me do this, and that's really putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Sometimes customers call me or write to me at the bank using abusive language. Occasionally we deserve the vitriol. In a lot of cases it's not really justified. And you can bet the temptation to hit back is often pretty strong. But when you try and understand what that customer might have gone through and how you or your family might have fared if you were in that customer's position, then you begin to see the situation quite differently. The work environment can make you pretty hard-headed and cold-nosed. At its best, it keeps you so busy that you have no time to think of others. At its worst, it becomes cutthroat, so you have no desire to think of others. In such an environment, I have found that reaching out and giving a helping hand can have hugely positive consequences. It not only makes you feel good about yourself, it also wins you a lot of friends. And in the long run, friends matter. Contrary to conventional wisdom, in my experience, nice guys generally finish first. I'm going to end with the words from one of my favorite songs. It's by Michael Jackson, and it says, "Heal the world, make it a better place, for you and for me and the entire human race. There are people dying. If you care enough for the living, make a better place for you and for me." Ladies and gentlemen, from the class of 2011, what can I say to you that will be better than Michael Jackson's words? Go out and make it a better place. I wish you good luck and Godspeed. Thank you.